We're rolling.
Thank you. I think Fred's in Florida. He put on a shirt and tie and he's down there with Steve with his background turned on. Did you hear that, Fred?
I had to go shut off my AC, but no, Steve looks like he's in a live situation, and I've just got a background.
Yeah, no, we think you're down there with Steve. You just put
Yeah,
on a
right.
shirt and tie and turned on your background.
Not this time.
Yeah. All right, it is 5 p.m. and here comes Tim right on time. So this
Tapping
is
the bell.
yeah. This is Councilor Bill Solms. I'm calling this regular meeting of the Ledyard Town Council's Finance Meeting Committee to order. Present are Finance Committee members Andra Ingalls and Tim Ryan, also Councilor McGrattan, Mayor Allen, Business Manager Rachel Mosier from the Department of Education, or the Board of Education, and Public Works Director Steve Maslin. And with that, I will ask if there are any public comments. I don't see the public, I don't hear any, so I'll move on to informational items. We will talk about it in the when we get to it. We had a couple of ideas from Chairman Davis for the ARPA funding, so you have an attachment under the agenda item. We had a letter from a resident, and it was sent to me directly about the article in the newspaper about the guardrails on Sandy Hollow Road. So I replied, copied everyone that is also attached to the agenda. And that's all I have. I would accept a motion to approve both the regular meeting minutes of September 15th and the field walk minutes from September 29th, if someone's willing to make the motion.
Counselor Ingalls, so moved.
Councilor Ryan? Okay, I'll second.
Sorry, I'm having a problem there. Sorry. Second.
That's okay, thank you. Any comments, corrections? They both look good. I reviewed them, so I don't think I sent any corrections, like a couple little minor things on the times. They were very good, Roxanne. So if you guys are ready to vote, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Councilor Solomons votes aye, the motion passes. I don't see Marcia yet. Hoping she'll.
She won't be joining us. Her son just moved here from Colorado, so she took the day to work with him.
Oh, okay, all right.
But what I will happily report one item though,
Okay.
Which is huge thank you to Senator Austin. She was able in the budget implementer bill to adjust the pilot funding rate the Mashantucket Pequot Reservation lands were assessed, or the valuation that the state put on it from a pilot perspective was 45%. They've increased it to 100%. So that was a huge benefit for us. She tells me via phone conversation yesterday that this is in perpetuity, and it adds $630,037 a year to Ledyard pilot. So that's a huge win for us. Mohegan or Montville got it too, their share because of Mohegan, and the state pier in New London did as well. So I think all three were definitely warranted, and I was very appreciative of her efforts for that. So I think there's Marcia.
Yeah, she is here.
I thanked her for her efforts, and it's obviously into the budget year when we know this now, but I'm sure that Marcia would like to see the payment this year go into fund balance, and then next year we can talk about how to best utilize those funds, either by way of a tax reduction or improved services or whatever the case may be. But when we come up on budget time, we'll cross that bridge.
That is outstanding news, Mayor. So So we received, I think for the second year in a row, an additional 500,000 that we thought we were going to lose. And this is, the 600,000 is on top of that, correct?
It is. So the additional 500,000 was from the Mohegan Pequot Fund, the slot revenues.
Yep.
And we spent years working on that and getting it done. And then, and again, Senator Austin was very helpful in that process. And then this time, this was 100% her. She recognized the inequity and made the change. So hugely grateful.
We owe her thanks. That's a great report, Mayor. Thank you. Good news. Marcia, thank you for joining us. We thought you weren't going to be able to. I'm glad you're here because we also have Superintendent Jay Hartling has joined us and Rachel has been here right along. So thank you. Anything else, Marcia, to report for finance? And you're mute.
No, I don't have anything else. It sounds like the mayor talked about our increase in pilot, and that's the big news, and I have nothing else beyond that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on to old business, just a few comments about the first item, which is review and discussion of the fire apparatus replacement plan. We held actually the fire departments conducted 2 field walks for the council. We had 4 counselors there. It was well attended by both fire departments memberships. They assigned 1 volunteer firefighter to each piece of apparatus or each truck. And each person demonstrating the truck went through every single compartment on the vehicle and showed us all of the equipment that they use. It was just completely impressive to me to see how much work and how much our volunteers and our professional paid firefighters have to know to operate these vehicles and how much rigging they have to do. We also talked about the dangers they encounter, not just from the expected dangers, but carcinogens and the procedures they have to go through to clean off their gear and keep themselves covered so that they don't get smoke and water on their skin, because that is a real problem for firefighters. They also shared some of the facts about the facilities themselves. Again, I was thoroughly impressed. We spent an hour each site, and as we were leaving the second site, they got a call and we were overtaken by emergency vehicles passing us on our way home. So we really appreciate what our volunteers and our paid firefighters do. It was eye-opening. Tim, Andrea, any other comments?
Well, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that we were also invited to, what's that?
You got the break stuff.
I did. They invited us and I took them up on it. An invitation to participate in the Jaws of Life demonstration at the Gales Ferry Fire Company's open house last weekend. Just hugely eye-opening. They Captain Nick Bosom got me in gear, and Assistant Fire Chief Jeff Earhart instructed me on how to use the spreader and the cutter that make up the Jaws of Life. These are massive pieces of equipment. They're 50 pounds a piece, and I could lift them, but to maneuver them was a different story. And then honestly, I was probably in the gear for about 45 minutes. And after about 10 minutes, I wanted out. And I just was, and it was a beautiful day, no fire, but I was just sweating, feeling really kind of claustrophobic in all that gear, and thinking about the mental toughness and the physical toughness that is required of our firefighters, in addition to the reality that each rescue is its own puzzle. There's nothing cookie cutter about the approach to a rescue. So very eye-opening, a heck of a lot of fun, but really, really eye-opening. And I just left with a new level of respect for our firefighters.
Thank you. Tim?
Yeah, no, I think I echo a lot of Andra's comments. What was really nice for me to see was their perspective on how they use their equipment. Specifically, the trucks that we don't really think about too much as non-professionals. Obviously, we see a ladder truck go by or an engine go by, and everybody knows what that is. I had no idea what I forget the right name for it, but it was essentially. I'm sorry.
Rescue truck.
Yeah, that was the one that carried all the cargo.
Yeah.
And but I mean that had an innumerable amount of tools in it that and you never really think about. And so it was for me, it was a great to get their perspective on the practitioner's perspective on the tools they need to do their job.
Yeah, time well spent. The reason we were there was because more than one of our vehicles has frame rail rot due to the increased use of brine on Connecticut state and town roads. So we're looking at the overall replacement plan. We're looking at possibly combining some vehicles, and we wanted to understand what that means to the firefighters, to the department, and also what our timeline is, because rusting frame rails is not a good thing. So I do have some good news. R11 is reportedly back in town. I saw a picture of it from Director of Emergency Services, Steve Holyfield. So that's been a long 2-year at least wait for a vehicle that had engine problems, and it's back with us. I don't think it's in service yet. I think they're probably doing some testing, but it's good to have that unit back. And I did see the Green Goblin go out. I don't know, I think it was yesterday. It was going out on a call. So that's why I say I don't think R11's quite back in service. But anyway, it was time well spent. So thank you all for attending, and we thank the both fire companies. Okay, I got a bunch of stuff open. Let me see where we're going here. The next item is the ARPA funding, and Mayor, I added a couple of items that Councilor Davis suggested, because we noticed in conversation and discussion that our funding list is heavily loaded to Ledyard Center. She added 2 things. One was solar charging station for the senior center lot, which I think is a good idea. If we should have one in Ledyard Center, we should have one in the Gales Ferry side of town. Also, she suggested some improvements to Erickson Park, which gets a lot of use, and I think that's something that we should also look at. My suggestion or request is that we put the solar charging station in your court, Mayor, since I think you came up with the idea for the one for Ledyard Center, and we'll ask Parks and Rec if they can give us some thoughts on what they would do with Erickson Park for improvements and what those improvements would cost. I also added last week, I mentioned the idea of thinking about starting to replace Highland sewer lines, not sewer, I said sewer lines, but I meant water lines. This arose as a discussion about some repaving we're doing on town roads in some developments where water lines are constantly breaking, and we no sooner repave a road and it has to be dug up by the water company to repair a leak. And I should mention that is not the town's water company, it's the other water company that serves town. So my point is, I think we should also look at the Highlands and consider whether we need to start replacing lines, because we do have some breaks there occasionally, and we want to invest in water lines rather than invest in paving roads and then digging them up and repaving. So those are the only things I have on that. And I'll turn it over to the other councilors if there's anything else on ARPA, or you, Mayor, if any news or other thoughts.
Yeah, so I did add all those projects to the list and categorize them. I also added, I spoke to Scott Johnson from Parks and Rec, and he had indicated that the Donahue parcel, which is the one at 13 Winthrop, it's kind of right behind the Gales Ferry Community Center. It has very antiquated playground equipment there. So I asked him to get me an estimate for what it would cost to replace that playground equipment. And then that would be one more item that would be on the Gales Ferry side of town. And I also attended the EDC meeting last night, and they have had discussions for a couple months now about doing a marketing or promotional video for the town of Ledyard. And they already have estimates that range from $3,500 to about $4,200. So I said that I would put that on the list, and then that'll be up for discussion for all of you at a later date. But I will gather some information on that and see if there are other projects. I don't think there's any harm in kind of bolstering the project list beyond what we have right now, because if WPCA does succeed in getting that grant funding, the 50% grant funding for the sewer line, we'll actually have more projects that we can do ourselves, because it will free up as much as $1 million. So
Absolutely.
but yeah, we'll keep working on the list. There's no huge rush, so we'll continue working on the list, and at our next meeting we can continue the conversations. But I will turn it over to the other counselors.
Great. Do you have the Nathan Lester House back on your list, Mayor?
It is on there for $30,000 for the left payment. Yep.
Great. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the process, because I know Chairman Davis said that she wants to talk during a council meeting about the process. I read an article yesterday that major cities and states have spent very little of their ARPA funds, which is no different from us. We're in the planning stage, and we do have some almost shovel-ready projects, but we are yet to spend $1. And different towns are approaching the process different ways. There's no formal application process. There are guidelines of things you can't spend it on, things you can spend it on, and towns are just asked to follow the guidelines. So I'm thinking, just speaking for myself, we continue to build this list. And I think we've said in the past, we would then start to move these items into the capital improvement plan, some of them that are our capital improvement projects. And others we just present as, this is an emergency that we really need to do quickly. An example would be the pole barn on the town green with concrete floor, to avoid liability if somebody turns an ankle or gets badly hurt there. That is a liability in an accident waiting to happen. So we break these out into capital improvement items, emergency items. We discuss them at town council meetings. Part of it would be included in the budget, because we have 2 years to decide how we're going to spend the money and 4 years to get it spent, correct?
It's so the end of 2024 is when we have to kind of identify how we're going to spend, and the end of 2026 is when we have to actually have moved the money out.
Right, got it. Okay, thank you. So we do want to bring this to the public, and at some point encourage residents to suggest other ideas. And then we'll, of course, have a bigger list than we can do, and then we'll trim it back down based on need. So that's kind of what I think we're thinking about for a process. And I'll leave it at that. Councilors, other comments?
I like the idea of going a little bit slowly and gathering public ideas. Certainly there are things we haven't thought of.
Yep.
Certainly there are things that are going to come up in 6 months. So I'm a fan of going slow. We don't need to rush to spend it all and then wish we had, gone a little slower or held some back for another year. There's just no rush.
Exactly.
Except I agree, Bill, that, to identify the higher priority items would be smart too.
Yep. Yeah, thank you. Councilor Ryan?
Yeah, on that, I think I'm not sure we're going to engineer a solution in this meeting, but we probably want to have more discussion on the rubric or the criteria we use to identify what those chosen projects are. I think that's going to be crucial for from a transparency perspective with the public, just to make sure that no favorites are being played. We're not doing projects that are, pet projects with somebody. Not saying there are, I'm just saying we just want to make sure that we use a standard criteria and we have justification for each of the projects.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be the most important thing that we do, but going slow is definitely something I'm in favor of. We can look across the river and see what happens when you try to ram a solution through. I know New London's already taken a vote on spending $26 million. They have to do 2 more votes, but there's a lot of upheaval about that, and that's because they're rushing to do it. So I don't see an issue with taking our time, as Andres said, get public input, but we do want to make sure that when we do prioritize the list, that the criteria we use is standardized and clear to everybody that's looking at it.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah. All right, thank you. Is there any other old business? Hearing none, I'll move on to new business. First item is a discussion regarding the bid for the building management system, and specifically the process for funding authorizations and how we get that done. We have both the business manager for the Board of Ed and Superintendent Hartling patiently waiting for us, and also Marcia is with us. So my hope is that we would go through the process that should happen. I don't want to spend a lot of time on how we got here. What I want to do is make sure we're all clear on what should happen going forward. And then we also need to discuss how we're going to pay for the building management system, because it has already been approved and signed off on. So is that fair? Hearing no objection, Marcia, I would ask you if you could turn your mic on and kind of walk us through the process for how, once we get something on the capital plan that we're planning to implement, what are the steps, starting with when the budget is approved? What happens?
Okay, so the capital improvement plan spreadsheet has several columns for items that have been deemed to be set for approval. And then once the approval happens at the town council level and the whole budget goes to referendum, anything in the taxpayer column in the capital improvement plan is automatically approved if the budget is approved. Any of the other columns in the funding sources area takes on a different process. So grants, obviously, we know that we have to apply for the grant. And once we've been approved, then we can spend that money and follow the reimbursement process that the individual grants have. Some of those processes differ from each other. If the funding is coming from another fund or from contingency, not contingency, conveyance fees, and that happens with Parks and Rec and Public Works. Mm-hmm. Some of their items come from conveyance, so we know how to handle that from a funding source when we activate the budget for the following year. Then there's another column called bonding. And if the funding source has been designated to come from bonding, then those items would not be available to be started until the items have gone to a town meeting and approval has been given to go to bond. And then we have to go to bond, which is usually, lately has been May or June. And then those funds would be available starting in July with the new budget year. So I think the idea is that it's very important when we go out to bid to make sure that the funding source has been identified, and if there are any additional approvals that are needed, such as a grant application and approval of that application or bonding via a town meeting, that those have happened. And so, and then once the funding has been established and received, then and only then should we go out to bid. So, I mean, we can get a preliminary numbers as we usually do with pre-engineering and things like that. But for the project itself, we should not be going out to bid until we have the money committed to us.
So,
yeah,
so
go ahead.
an example of that would be the track and field. We got preliminary estimates, or the PMBC got preliminary estimates. Then we went to bonding, went to public meeting, correct?
We went to a public meeting and then we bonded, yes.
And then bond, I'm sorry, yeah.
Yep.
So
Councilman Sons, is PMBC on this call?
No, they're not.
Okay, we should definitely loop our friends at PMBC in, because like that, the building management project was assigned to PMBC. PMBC went out to bid, so that way we can make sure we're all on the same sheet of music.
Yeah, so Jay, I'm hoping that by having this discussion, we'll document the process and then we'll communicate it in writing to everybody. PMBC, Board of Ed, General Government.
That's great, thank you.
Okay, so question, Marcia. We have an ordinance that says that before applying for a grant, any department has to get town council approval to apply for the grant. Can we assume that if a project is in the capital improvement plan and part of it is funded by grants, that a department that's going to implement that project does not have to apply to the town council to get approval to apply for a grant? Am I right?
I would say that just as long as the town council during the budget process has vetted that that grant as fully as you would if somebody came in the middle of the year with a new grant application.
Okay. All right. So good to know. So we probably want to look at a grant application anyway before, even though it says it's approved in the budget with grant funding, before we apply, we need to look at that and bring it past the council. So,
I think that's, yes, I think that's good.
Yeah, I think it's kind of the way we've been doing it anyway. So, okay, so let's talk about the detailed process. So after the budget is approved, a letter goes from the town council with a list of projects. I've got so much open here. Give me a second. In our agenda, there is a copy of a letter. It's the town council action letter, which I'm opening. And that was dated July 29th. It went to the Board of Ed and to the PMBC, and it said, at its regular meeting on July 28th, the council took the following actions, and it approves projects. And it lists the projects that are approved by the town council and that are already in the budget. So the next question is, rather than ask a question, I'm going to suggest that then the PMBC would go out and get quotes / bids to provide estimates for each project, bring them back to finance, right, Marcia?
Yes.
And then we go through the process of a public meeting to get the taxpayers' approval to go out for bonding for these projects based on the estimates, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So we get the residents' approval at a public meeting, a town meeting. Then we go and get actual quotes, and then we have the opportunity to award a bid. And that would be who? The PMBC?
If it's a project that has been, yes, given to the
If it's their
PMBC.
project. Yep. Okay. All right. So
Now-
Roxanne is sharing something on the screen. So
It's the letter, Bill. It's the action letter with the attachment.
Okay, yeah, there's the letter. Thank you. Sideways, but
And there's the attachment that was with it.
yep, okay. So what we need to pay attention to is the column in blue, grants, and the column in pink, bonding. And before awarding bids, that's what we have to go through an additional process for to get approvals before we award any bids.
Correct.
Thank you. Superintendent Hartling or Business Manager Mosier, did you have any comments or questions before I go on?
No, Bill, that makes sense. I mean, I'm glad we're gonna delineate the process because we kind of defaulted to PMBC, so that's good.
Yep, okay. All right, so now, since speaking specifically to the building management system, we've the town, the Board of Ed, we have awarded or notified a bidder that they won the business. And we haven't got the bonding approved for that. So the question is, how do we pay for that? It's not a huge dollar amount, but it's not insignificant either. So we've got to come up with the funding to pay for that building management system. And there've been several comments and suggestions. I don't have any particular leaning, so I want to get folks your thoughts on what we should do, what funding we can use to pay for that. One idea was use ARPA funding from the Board of Ed. And then I heard some ideas about maybe getting reimbursed through bonding. I'm not sure how that would work. So open to comments.
So this is Jay. The bid would, just to be very clear, the bid was put out and awarded by PMBC, not by the Board of Ed, just because I think there might be confusion there. The other piece is we can't use our ESSER funding. It's not the same as the ARPA funding. We've allocated those funds so that, and reimbursing that would be an ugly process. So I want to take that off the table, and then any decision that's made relative to the board pushing any funds forward would go to the finance committee, and that'd be at the discretion of the Board of Education. I can't make that call for them.
Yep, got it. Okay. Marcia, any other ideas, assuming the ESSER funds are off the table?
Well, I will say that anything that is used now can be reimbursed through bonding. They call that self-funding until you go to bond. So okay. Whatever we use can still go to a town meeting for approval and then reimbursement from when we sell the bonds.
Got it. Okay. So that would go to Board of Ed Finance Committee, and maybe that's the vehicle we use. We self-fund, front the money, go to bonding, and then reimburse.
Well, or the town council has control over the CNR funds that are allocated to the Board of Education, and the board can vote to endorse that. But you all have the decision on that funding anyway. So. Yep.
And I don't have the balances in front of me, Jay. I think there's sufficient funding in there to carry us through till May. Is that your sense, Rachel? Maybe.
I think you're 100% on, Marcia. I think there is more than sufficient funding in that account to carry us through May. I think you're absolutely right.
Okay, so that sounds like a good recommendation, Bill.
Okay, very good. All right.
If that's your wish, then I can add that to the Board of Education Finance and Board meeting that's happening next Wednesday, which would be, I think, the same time as your town council meeting.
Yep, that'd be great, Jay. Thank you. All right, let's do that, and then we'll get this documented and a letter out to everyone on the process.
Bill, I would just like to add a couple of things. Sure. For instructions or as part of the process for PMBC. I think that any discussion of going out to bid that they may have needs to come through the finance office, because before they go out to bid, just as a second set of eyes, and to look at the bid documents, but also I will always look at the SIP and make sure that this item is something that is either tax funded or that immediate funds are available.
Yep.
And then if not, halt the process.
Yeah, good point, Marcia. I'm glad you mentioned that, because the point has been made earlier that the PMBC is a group of volunteers, and we can't put it on them to know the town financial processes. So if we will add a step for PMBC before they go out to bid, that they come by the Town Council Finance Committee, because we also have some very good process for writing RFPs and publishing bids. So we'll add that to the process.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Anything else? Okay, Jay, Rachel, thank you for attending, and we will get this out to everyone.
No problem. Happy to be on and look forward to seeing the draft. Thank you, Bill.
All right. Have a good evening. So let's move on to councilors. Anything else before we move on? No. Okay, let's move on. I'll entertain a motion for item number 2.
Counselor Ingalls, I make a motion to recommend the town council authorize the over expenditure of Public Works account 101-40103-51130, regular overtime in the amount of up to $29,500 total due to much higher than normal overtime demands to date.
Is there a second?
Second, Counselor Ryan.
Thank you, Tim. So we have Steve Maslin with us, I think, and we've had unexpected overtime, higher than normal, higher than budgeted, and I'll let Steve add anything to that you wish.
I would say this is kind of routine for winter operations, but this is the first time ever for normal overtime account. We've had 2 tropical events that came through, and we are now in excess of 17,000 spent of the 21,500 for the entire year. So that's just where we're at as a result. Yeah.
Well, it's, this happens when you budget carefully. So
yeah,
good for us. So, unfortunate, but good. Huh?
Yeah, like I said, it's the first time that I had to make this request. Yep. And it's just too many other uncertainties, and so early in the fiscal year to kind of think that I would have money to move into that account later, you know what I mean, by way of transfer. So yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Well, 6 inches of rain doesn't happen every day.
Thankfully.
Hopefully it won't be happening every day. So okay, councilors, questions, comments?
When just for my edification, how is overtime authorized? Is that something that's just authorized all the time, or is it authorized piecemeal? Just what's the process for doing that?
Okay, there's a component which will change, I think, with the contract for the supervisors union, which will change this. But for now, the highway superintendent has a built-in 3/4 of an hour of overtime every working day for opening up the department and closing. He has to be there early and late. So he works a 45-minute day, 45 minutes more beyond his 8-hour regular day. So that is a built-in component of overtime. All other overtime is only used as required to meet emergency requirements that are call-ins, or we do occasionally use discretionary overtime to meet certain work needs that is very uncommon. But for instance, mulch day, where we open up on a Saturday, bring in a few guys, a couple operators and the highway superintendent to load residents of the double ground mulch. So that's very, we had 2 this year during the year, usually only 1, but most overtime is only as needed to meet emergency conditions. Tree down, a lot of trees. We've had a lot of trees down too this year. So that's another thing. Yeah.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. So back on, I think one of the first comments you made, you said the supervisor has a built-in 45 minutes every day for
Right.
overtime, right? Okay, so that's just factored into his annual salary, or that's considered
It will
overtime on
be,
top?
actually, Bill knows maybe more of the details of this, but it will,
Hasn't been ratified or approved yet, so.
yeah,
Okay,
it may change, but for now, his 45 minutes a day come out of that overtime account.
okay. All right, thank you.
That's normal business. I mean, he's got to do that every
Yeah.
single day.
Right.
Right.
So he has a longer work day than everybody else, just so he's there before the crew gets there.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
Andre, you good?
I'm good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Guys ready to vote? All in favor,
Mhm.
please say aye.
Counselor Ingalls votes aye.
Counselor Ryan votes aye.
Counselor Solomon votes aye and motion's approved. Thank you very much. Next item, please.
I guess I'll take this. I move to recommend the town council approve a supplemental appropriation to account number 101-40107 TAC 56306 for the removal of hazard town trees in the amount of $25,000 to be drawn from the general fund balance. I think there's a little typo there. General fund balance. So,
Counselor
There's a
Ingalls
second.
second.
Thank you. So we've seen the dead trees for the last couple of years. Gypsy moths first. We've got white oaks dead, standing by the sides of all our roads. And now we've got the emerald ash borer. And a year or two ago, we approved 25,000. This is another 25,000 to continue to remove these trees before they hurt somebody. So Steve, anything to add?
All I would say is if you look at the budgets over the last 3 years, going back to the year that 25,000 had been approved, I have transferred, out of the discretionary ability I have to transfer money on budget to this account during the year to cover expenses related to taking trees down. It's not stopped. It's not stopped for 3 years. And in fact, 2 years ago, I think I ended up with $40,000 in this budget, originally being a $4,000 budget. And we still are taking them down, and we still have a long list to go. And the reason I'm looking for a supplemental appropriation now is because, again, it's early in the year. If it were May and I looked around my budget and saw this kind of money, I could use my discretion to transfer it. So I'm not sure that that's going to be the case this year. So I'm just looking to get it now so I can keep going. Hopefully this will get us caught up.
Yeah. Steve, in the past, Eversource has worked with us to take down trees as well. Are they still doing that?
Yes, they are. They've been very good about that. They're Susan Stotts, the arborist I talk to regularly. I'll go around. I will look at the trees if they're in proximity to their utility wires. She's been very generous and allowed us to mark them as Eversource trees to be removed at their expense. And there is a tree crew from, I think it's Lewis Tree Service, who I can call directly and give him my list of Eversource trees, and he will chip away, no pun intended, at them. And so that's a separate list from the list that I'm working on. There are about a dozen or so Eversource trees that will be coming down at their expense.
Great, thank you.
Bill, can I just add one quick thing?
Sure, Mayor.
So incredibly timely, but today the regional Eversource liaison was in my office, and she covers most of Connecticut, all of Western Massachusetts, and New Hampshire. And she asked what our tree removal budget was, and I told her $4,000, and she said that's one of the lowest she's ever heard. And it really is. When you think about removing trees, it doesn't go very far.
No, it's 2 trees.
You're right.
Yeah.
That was it.
Interesting, thank you. Okay, counselors, comments? Tim?
Well, Andrea had her hand up.
Oh, go ahead, Tim.
Oh, no, I was just curious. I mean, I understand about, trying to keep budgets lean and everything. But this seems like it's a pattern, right? We've needed this money every year. Why don't we just build it into the regular budget for public works in the beginning of the year? I mean,
So,
this is more of a out looking towards FY22.
yeah, so
Yeah.
this is the result of the gypsy moth infestation. We had 2 or 3 years of really heavy gypsy moth damage,
Right.
which, a year later, 2 years later, and 3 years later, you've got dead trees.
Well,
Followed immediately by the emerald ash borer. So this hasn't been a normal pattern. And once these trees are gone,
so let me ask this a different way. Has $4,000 ever been sufficient?
Okay, so if you would look at, I mean, we can talk about this more broadly because there are more general fund line items related to public works items that are underfunded. But you have to take into consideration we have town aid road funding from the state. And so I regularly supplement not only tree removal, but guardrail repair, replacement, drainage work, paving work, for instance, just simply asphalt materials. Tens of thousands of dollars I spend out of the town aid road budget for those items. And as long as that town aid road money comes in the amount that we have, we're okay, but we're always vulnerable to what happens at the state level.
Right.
So it's been kind of transparent. You don't really see how vulnerable we might be or how much money we're really spending because the general fund amount doesn't really tell the story, doesn't even get close to telling the story on what we actually spend on all of these items, including tree removal. So, I mean, when we go into the budget year, my backup shows typically how much total we spend on each of these categories, which includes the amount the town aid road comes in to supplement the general government budget. And it's generally orders of magnitude higher than what we carry in the general fund. So, I mean, it's probably a good discussion to have going into the budget to see if we want to bear more of the burden in the town budget, take some of the pressure off town aid road to do more meaningful road work with perhaps. But that's kind of an answer, a broader answer to why we're only been at $4,000. We've actually spent routinely a lot more, not $40,000 a year, but say that probably in the $20,000 to $25,000 a year on
Right.
trees.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking of the different revenue streams, so I appreciate that.
Right.
So
Yeah.
okay, Andra?
So Steve, when does Eversource decide that the tree is their responsibility versus the town's?
Well, I think they've got a standard distance laterally from the wires, let's say. I think it's got to be within 10 feet or clearly in the fall zone in terms of the tree leaning. But Susan has been pretty generous with allowing me to make a judgment call on that without having her have to come out. She used to come out and we used to ride all of the roads, take my list that I had assembled and check off the ones that she would take on herself. And since we've done that so many times, she trusts my judgment. I don't take advantage of them.
Mhm.
Really. I mean, I apply fair judgment to it. And so that's how it works right now. She typically doesn't have to come out anymore. I will. And this other independent operator, the tree crew, he will look at them. He'll put his eyes on them too and see if he's comfortable doing it on behalf of Eversource. So he knows what their standards are. And if he says, yeah, no, that'll be a second check.
Got it. And how are the trees marked?
We put white dots on the ones that are on the town, and we take yellow paint, a yellow dot, naturally, and use that for Eversource. So if you go around town, you see trees that are dead, hopefully they've already been marked. That means we've caught them already. If they don't have a mark, don't hesitate to call them in. But a white mark alone is at our expense. Ones with yellow dots are ones that are on the Eversource list.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, guys ready to vote? All in favor, please say aye.
Counselor Ingalls votes aye.
Councilor Ryan votes aye.
And Councilor Solms votes aye, and the motion passes. The last item we think is a duplicate from the September 15th meeting. We believe that the tax collector resubmitted the document in error, so Roxanne is going to check that and verify whether that's one we need to act on, but it appears to be exactly the same document resubmitted. So
I can speak to that.
oh, go ahead,
I-
Marcia.
I
Please.
tend to get a lot of the same email notifications.
Yep.
From iCompass. So I think that that was one that I probably approved by mistake instead of just deleting it.
Okay.
So pretty sure that you guys have the right idea on that one.
Yeah, the documents are identical. The only difference is there's a new date on this one, a more recent date, handwritten by the tax collector with their signature, and she had not done that on the original document. So I'm not sure what happened, but we'll just make sure that this doesn't need to go before we take any action on it. So, and that's all I have. So, seeing no other business, I will adjourn this meeting without exception at 5:50 p.m. and thank you all very much for your time.
Excellent.
Right.
Good night,
Thanks,
everyone.
everybody.
Have a
Bye,
good night.
everybody.
Good night.
Good night.